Diagnosing dyslexia in your child may be possible earlier than you'd expect, and catching it early on with the right kind of intervention could make all the difference for your child's ability to learn. Today's guest from Red Door Pediatric Therapy is Sara Erickson, and welcome to you, Sara.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. This is a really interesting topic. I think dyslexia is a term that many of us have certainly heard, maybe a little bit familiar with, but we don't really know what it means. Could you start by just defining it for us?
Yeah, so dyslexia is a neurologically based and inherited learning disorder that can impact an individual's ability to read, write, and spell despite having average intelligence.
Okay, so what do we know about what causes it?
So, and it can range from, mild severity to really severe. So the symptoms are going to present differently in everyone. Um, As far as the causes, there's a neurological difference. So individuals with dyslexia actually have a larger right hemisphere in their brain. And so the wiring in the nerve pathway processes language and the information related to reading, writing, and spelling a little bit differently than individuals without dyslexia.
One of the things you said, and I just really liked it, I thought it was maybe important to highlight here in your definition, is that it's not connected to intelligence. A person could have strong intelligence, but this is still a lifelong learning disorder, correct?
Yeah, it is. It's lifelong, but with the appropriate interventions and supports in place, people with dyslexia can be very successful.
Mhm.
There, in addition to the neurological difference, genetics plays a huge part in dyslexia. So it's one of the most inherited conditions, and it runs really strong in family trees. So about 50% chance of having it if another family member does.
That is so interesting. Okay, so that alone may give you a little bit of a heads up with your own children as you're kind of watching as things develop. But we have plenty of other warning signs, maybe some red flags that we could walk through that I think will be really helpful for parents. So where could you start to notice those? As young as preschool, kindergarten age, maybe?
Yeah, in preschool and kindergarten. Familial history, like we already talked about, is a huge red flag. So just something to kind of be aware of. But right away, for our preschool kids, delayed speech. So mixing up sounds and words, confusion with some of those directionality concepts. So left versus right, over versus under, up versus down. So some of those things might be a little bit trickier. Inability to master tying shoes. So these kids try and try and try and practice, and they just can't master tying their shoes. Some individuals will be late to establish a dominant hand, so they might not establish hand dominance until 7 or 8 years old. Difficulty with rhyming, learning the names of the letters is a big one, so the letters of the alphabet, and then phonemic awareness is another big area that's difficult for these individuals. So learning the relationship between letters and the sounds they make. So just for example, letter C can make two different sounds. So it can make the k sound as you'd hear in cat, or the sound that you'd hear at the beginning of circle. So learning what sounds each letter makes is really difficult for these kids.
I think as you're walking through these examples, it really goes to show that my understanding of what dyslexia was so limited. I'm just thinking of it in terms of reading and writing. It really has a lot to do with just your ability to function in the world too. So elementary school age kids, then you get to a different set of warning signs and red flags. What do you see there?
Yeah, and so you're still going to be seeing the ones that I already talked about in preschool, but in elementary school, a lot of these kids are going to be already receiving reading support in the school setting, and if they're not, maybe they should be. So they're going to be behind their grade level for reading. You might notice letter and number reversals continuing past what would be age appropriate, so typically the end of first grade. Difficulty with reading and comprehension. So we might be slow and choppy when we're reading, just really inconsistent. So they might be able to read one word on one page, but then when they get to the next page, it's like they've never seen it before. They might be guessing words and confusing letters that look similar, reversing words as far as reading goes. And then with regard to writing, this is going to be difficult for some kids with dyslexia as well. So We might notice an odd pencil grip, slow kind of non-automatic writing, difficulty copying off the board, spacing, letter formation, some of that stuff is going to be a little bit trickier. Spelling is a big one too. So despite studying and working so hard to practice spelling words, these kids might be able to pass the spelling test, but then the next day they just won't be able to generalize those skills and actually spell the word right when they're using it in sentences. And then just more of like sequencing daily tasks, organization skills, and all of this is going to lead to some of that low self-esteem.
Yes, you can understand the defeating feeling I think you might feel up against all of those challenges. I'm sure there's a lot of families who maybe make it to the high school age before they're really diagnosing the problem because of stigma associated with dyslexia. So what are some of the things you might be seeing in the high school ages?
Yeah, and again, just kind of going off of the ones that we've previously mentioned already, you're going to probably see that and be able to look back and say, oh yeah, those were really tricky when I was younger. But poor grades is going to be a big one for our high school students. Limited vocabulary, poor written expression. So there's probably going to be a discrepancy between their verbal skills and their written skills. So verbally, they can tell you and explain things, but getting it down on paper is going to be really tricky for them.
Okay.
So a foreign language, yeah, so.
Oh, I apologize for stopping you. There are so many here that you've talked about, and I don't want to run out of time here because it's important. If you've noticed a couple of these things pop up on your screen and you think they may look familiar, what do you suggest those families do?
Yeah, so an individual with 3 or more of these classic warning signs may benefit from additional testing or assessment for possible dyslexia, especially if we have that family history of dyslexia. And children can be tested as early as age 5. So that's something to look for too.
That's excellent. And you can go to Red Door Pediatric Therapy for a free screening as well as some treatment for it.
Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, where do we find you guys?
So we have 4 clinics, but we have 1 main line. So you can contact us at 701-222-3175 and just ask for a free screening.
Excellent. Exciting to see more clinics open up for you guys. Well, Sara Erickson, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure you made a lot of impact out there.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're taking a quick break on North Dakota Today. Stay with us. We'll be right back.